welcome to our webinar, Data Informed Teaching, where you're going to learn how you can develop classroom activities and individual support activities for a wide variety of student proficiencies, oh my goodness, by utilizing our platform offered by Cambridge. I'm Jennifer Rogers from Cambridge University Press and Assessment, and I'm going to be hosting this webinar with our speakers, S.K. Smith and Stefanie Gigante from the North American Cambridge Classics Project, otherwise known as NACCP. So thank you for joining us. We're going to give everyone a little time to join. And while we do that, please feel free to pop into the chat and say hello. Let us know where you're joining from. And if you're currently teaching any of our products, we'd love to know what digital resources you're using. While we're waiting, I'm also going to let you know that we're recording today's webinar to share with you afterwards. So if your internet drops out or if you're not able to continue with the webinar, we will send out a link to you by email, and it'll also be on our website. If you're having trouble with your speakers, please try using headphones. And if you have any concerns, please let me know via the comment box. And please make sure to keep your microphones and your videos off. Our session is going to be 45 minutes long. And like I said, we'll send you that recording afterward. So I'm pleased to welcome our presenters who have had a wealth of experience in the classroom. Both have taught for over 20 years. S.K. Smith teaches at Riverdale Country School in New York, and Stefanie Gigante teaches in New Jersey and also serves as a technology innovation specialist with her school district. Stefanie and Smith, I'm going to hand it over to you.
Thanks so much. And Jennifer, would you make sure our chat is open so people can say hello? Thank you. Steph, do you want to start? Oh, I think your sound is out again. Sorry. We're just making sure that all the tech is in place as we begin.
How about now?
Yeah, turn it up just a little bit more.
Oh, I can't change the volume, but
Oh, that sounds a little better. Yeah.
okay. Oh, that's so strange. This happened to me last time too. I don't know what's going on. And you heard me. I was talking just fine in our okay. Anywho, so welcome everyone. We've been building the skills and your awareness of all the new and exciting digital resources over the first 3 sessions. And we're going to start getting into some minutia today with some data and numbers. Smith, did you want to add anything before I start screen sharing?
Well, I had a lot of homework to do, so I hope that everyone forgives my poor performance in Latin just for the fact that we needed to collect some data.
Yeah, so for this webinar, and we modeled this a little bit last week, but I performed the role of the teacher in terms of assigning Smith a bunch of activities. Smith was my student. She completed a bunch of activities, but she completed it with varying degrees of success on purpose. Don't worry, she is a very skilled Latinist. She would never normally make these errors, but just to sort of show you what type of data you can expect to see from your students, and then how to start making sense of it and using it for informing your classroom instruction. So with that in mind, I'm going to go ahead and share the screen in which I am a teacher within the new digital resources platform. So I know we demonstrated this last week, so I'm not going to waste your time by showing it again here. But when you get into your new digital resource package and you scroll down, you'll find language activities. And language activities is really the heart of what you're going to be using to get that sort of fungible data as you move forward in your classes. So as soon as the authenticating finishes, all right. So we had talked a little bit last week about creating a classroom. I had recommended that you make a classroom, or a class rather, for each one of the sections of your class, so that even if you have like 2 Latin 2 classes, one is period 2 and one is period 6, that you still make 2 separate categories for them, so that you can use that data in separate ways. Otherwise you get like all 100 kids there, and it's just distracting. I get that. So you can see in the My Activities scroll that Smith was very busy the last few days, and I'm sorry for all the homework I assigned, but I hope you'll forgive me. um, One of the things that I don't think I necessarily showed with you last week when we were talking about the assignments themselves was filtering them and being able to show what you've done. So I'm going to go ahead and filter them just to show you that you can uh, structure it a little bit differently. So I'm just going to do the ones that I've assigned with this spring webinar demo class. And then with all statuses, I have the opportunity to look at what I still have in draft mode that I haven't published yet for the students, which activities are live, and then which ones are report ready, which is that the assignment has been launched. The students should have done it by the due date, and the due date has come and gone, and the activity is over. I'm going to go ahead and just select all statuses and then show you that it sort of narrows it down a little bit. Then after the filter, you can also sort it by either most recent, the date of creation within the class, or the classes A to Z, and then the classes afterwards as well. As you're looking at it, you can see, and I know Smith alluded to this last week, that there is color coding for each activity that shows if a task is still open, if it's green, and then if it's live and ongoing, then it would be blue. And so it gives you a little bit of variety in terms of what you're looking at here. All right, and then now we can really start digging in and kind of getting our feet wet. So we had just sort of alluded to this last week because we were saving all of the fun for this week. A quick FYI for you. So this task is not due. I set it without a due date because I wanted to be able to demonstrate to you some of the ways in which you can sort of finalize it, if you will. So in order to count the grades and have access to the report, all you would do is go up to these 3 blue dots, and then you're going to go ahead and end activity. Once you end the activity, it says you will not be able to republish it. If a student is taking activity, their progress will be saved and the page will time out. I'm going to go ahead and end the activity. That will also mean, though, just as advice for the future, if you're in the demo version of our product, you're not going to be able to reassign the tasks. However, this is a feature that will be standardized in the official launch as of August, so that if you wanted to be able to reuse this particular activity with your class, maybe they didn't do so well on it the first time, you can always reassign it and redeploy it in the future. All right, and then when it's closed, you can view the report and so on and so forth. So I'm going to go ahead and close a few of these because I want to be able to show you some of the data that we get from it. Now I can see, so like I can see the data right now, but to close it means that you are going to be making that data appear in the gradebook, which is something that we will get to, I promise. All right, so a sorting exercise. You're used to sorting exercises. You've seen them in Cambridge Elevate, right? It's where the students get a bunch of words and they have to put it into different categories. So this sorting exercise in stage 5 is nouns or verbs. You're going to see, by the way, that a lot of the activities that we deployed for the purpose of demonstrations today are all focused in stage 5. We wanted to give you a nice, robust, sort of comprehensive sense of what is available within each stage, and just sort of concentrate our efforts to just one stage rather than doing a whole lot of like, you could do this in stage 8 and this one in stage 1, right? So just so you guys can get a more like focused view. So I'm going to go ahead and view the report for something that is closed from a sorting activity. And I can see that if you remember, this is phrased the same way it was in Elevate. So question 1 means that there were 5 different terms that had to be sorted into different categories. Question 2 was another, maybe 6 different nouns or verbs to be sorted. So I can see that in question 1, 0% of the content was correct. In question 2, Smith was batting 1,000. In question 3, she got all the verbs, but the nouns were a little bit elusive to her, but then she recovered, and question 4 was really where she shined. And then here, again, I can see a summary. Now, it's a little hard. So in theory, this category here, questions students struggled with, it should be giving like overall highlights. It should be giving an idea, and I mean it is right now, but like the most challenging questions for the whole class, which are the questions that I, as a teacher, would be focusing on in class the next day. So what I would see, hopefully, if you have a class of more than one, you'll see, let's say you have a class of 10, you'll see that with question noun, with question one, that you can see that with the nouns, maybe only 5 out of 10 students were correct, but the students were stronger for verbs in that particular question. So then that gives you an idea of what to do in class the next day to help you differentiate, or to help the students differentiate between nouns and verbs. Maybe you could replicate that activity. Maybe you could do it, with index cards on a piece of paper. Maybe you could take a story that you've already read through and look at it through a grammatical lens, to encourage more noun and verb identification. Maybe you could go, we're in stage 5 right now. Maybe you could use this data and say, okay, they're really struggling with nouns. So let's, go back to the old school method. Maybe you show a Schoolhouse Rock video with, the noun song, a person, place, or thing or something. And then you take that story and you take that concept, you go back to stage 1, that very first story of Cana. Let's talk about Cana, right? Where are the nouns? Where are the verbs in this story? So this data is really helpful for you then to see, this is a pretty critical concept to understand the difference between nouns and actions. Here, I can also get a much more detailed view of the sorting exercise. So these are the 4 nouns that should have been sorted accordingly. And I can see that, one person got the nouns incorrect and then got all the verbs incorrect as well. So maybe these verbs, as a teacher, right, we all know like odd est and obest, kids really do struggle with these because they don't look like typical verbs. And so maybe you could make it a point in your instruction to do something that was targeted toward those more irregular forms. And then because this gives you an idea of the specific vocabulary, that also gives you an idea like, okay, so with nawim, like they're pretty good at recognizing that it's a noun, even though it doesn't have a nominative ending. But with this one, there were 2 nouns that had accusative endings, and this one was not very popularly accurate among the students. So you can kind of leverage their answers with what you do in class with that. Sorry, Smith, I've been talking a lot. Did you want to share anything?
Yeah, I think it's really important that the whole purpose of this is data-informed teaching. And so if you're thinking about collecting specific information, not only as trends for your overall class, but for individual students, this would be a perfect opportunity to print out, take a screenshot and print out, like, here's where you are. You can export the spreadsheet if you want, however is easiest for you, but to show kids, like, this is where you're struggling. Here's some very specific information that I got, because sometimes kids will just go through the motions of doing an activity, and you can say, okay, this is what I got. This is very specific information about what I see you are or not understanding. And I think that the more that you can really open up these conversations to kids about, this is the data that I'm getting about your learning, here is the data that you have about your learning, and how can we work together to make sure that what you are or not understanding is really going to improve my instruction for you and your learning in the classroom.
So thank you, Smith. We started looking at the comprehensive question content. I can also look at student, and I can see, right, that there were 35 out of 40 correct answers from Smith. So SS, those are her initials, and you would eventually obviously get much more of a cross section of your whole class in a chart like this. But then I can also see, Smith spent 1 minute and 14 seconds, and perhaps, I know Smith made an allusion to this in what she just said, but perhaps you can see that there is a trend that the students are not paying a lot of time into this task, and maybe you could show them that correlation. And if you wanted to, you could organize this type of chart. I don't have a whole lot of students here, but you could organize it by time, and you could perhaps even maybe cover up this part of the screen with something, but maybe go make it anonymous, but you could export the spreadsheet and then just show it without the particular column that has names in it. And you could say, like, look at the correlation between the time that people spent doing this activity and what their score was. And I think that, kids are really data driven, even though they don't know that they're data driven. They know they're pretty good about the correlation between numbers, right? So they can at least see like, oh, so the kids who are doing this activity for 22 seconds are the kids who are getting like, a 20 out of 40 instead of like a 35 or something like that. And they might be, or you can coach them that these are sort of the causes and effects. And as Smith said, this can also foster a one-on-one conversation with you and the student too. Hey, I'd like for you to come after class because, I noticed that this is not your typical work. You only spent a minute on this activity. Is everything okay? Because I know normally you usually take your time with something. And that could also lead to, a more in-depth discussion with you and your student. And then your student knows that you're looking out for them and it started in really a data discussion.
And conversely, if it takes like 5 hours, there's a
Well, yes. Yes.
And so, but it could also be like they left it open, they got interrupted, or, maybe they're like distracted. And so that is a really important conversation to have with, you were doing this very kind of simple, straightforward exercise. What were you paying attention to on the sidelines? And maybe they just needed a break or went to eat dinner and came back. So you never know. But I think, as Steph is mentioning, opening the conversation with data is really important, both for students and for parents, so they can see what's going on as well.
Yes, excellent. I want to showcase the reporting technique for a language activity. So each stage has reviewing the language activities. And so in this question of singulars and plurals, I can see that, again, we only have the one, but I can see that questions 2, 4, and 9 were particularly challenging for the class. And then I can see here that this was the one that was incorrect. I can get a sense for the fact that perhaps it was the translation issue, right? And then we can kind of go back and see more information about, what the student wrote versus what the answer ought to have been. All right, and then let's look at a vocabulary activity. Where did the vocab go? You could sort declensions too, but let's do vocabulary. Okay.
Yeah, there it is.
There it is. All right, so now we have a lot of words, right? So we have 20 words total. Actually, more than that, right? Yes, it goes to 26 words total. So I can see then, a nice cross section of the questions that were correct and incorrect on the whole. 4, 5, 7, 8, 9, these were all relatively challenging. Perhaps you'll get less of a list when you have more of a class where the data is a little bit less skewed, I guess. All right, but then I can also see, okay, which were the words that were incorrectly answered and which ones were, and I could just sort it by incorrect and just sort of focus on like, okay, question 4 was contended, turba, yeah, well, okay, let me give the students a derivative then to remember turba by. UNS, like maybe I could focus more example that I use in class using UNS and Plomor or something of that nature to help the students really acquire and utilize that meaning in a more concrete way.
I will say that in this particular exercise, the teaching of macrons is particularly helpful for distinguishing between present and perfect tenses. And so this would be a good opportunity for students to pay attention to those because they're definitely contended versus contendent. So you can see the difference physically for students, whether it's present or past, and how they're performing, if they're missing it, if they're not paying attention to macrons.
Yep. I could export this to a spreadsheet. Again, we were talking about that earlier, and then you could, manipulate the data even further. You could do like a cross-class comparison if you had a spreadsheet and you wanted to see, which were the most frequently missed questions across your 2 or 3 sections. You could do a lot of information gathering like that. I also wanted to sort of bring up the idea of the student gradebook and seeing, what you can learn about the student by themselves. So if I go to the gradebook, you're going to notice something, and I'm going to actually have to go back and fix something before I show you the whole gradebook. So right now, I only see activities from stage 1 and stage 5. And you might be thinking, well, I'm pretty sure I just saw a laundry list of other activities. And you're right. So what I need to do is go back to the classes, over here. Oops, go back to home rather. And all of the other activities from all of the other stages, I have to close them out in order to make sure that I can get those activities into Smith's overall gradebook. But I'd like to be able to do that because I want to show you the power of having all of those activities accessible. Let's see here, and activity. We did stage 8 last week. All right. So I don't need to do everything here, but just to sort of show you what you can see. I also want to just show you quickly the vocabulary. This is a multiple choice activity. This is English to Latin multiple choice. There are a couple different ways of rendering each of these. While we wait for the data to sync, I'm just going to show you the sorting activity for stage 12. Again, I can see that in question 1, these 2 were identified correctly. These 4 were identified correctly as U singular, U plural. But then I could also see the U plurals for the imperfect, right? I can, as a teacher, right, you can kind of narrow it down and say, yes, these are the ones that the students struggled with. And then you can refocus your class. And by the time this type of activity comes up, it's stage 12. So you have more, it's more review. It's not really direct instruction, but it's a way to sort of coalesce the students' knowledge of it before they move on to the blue book, where things get, more complicated in several ways. Alrighty, and then what was the other thing I want to look at? Singulars and plurals. Did we do 1 or 2 before Smith? I forget.
I think we did 1 before, so let's do 2.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, so another singular and plural activity. Again, I can sort it by what's correct versus what is incorrect. I can see that, it just so happens that the 2 incorrect sentences featured pastor as a noun. So then again, I can make sure to use pastor in a more robust and obvious way in the next few classes to make sure that the students really understand what that word means. It does show that a lot of the correct answers came from choosing the correct verb. And that's promising because now I know that the students know how to wrangle with both singular and plural verb forms as they choose them. All right, so I'm going to reload my window just to make sure that the data is accurately loading into the gradebook. You won't have to do this. I'm just making sure for our purposes today that everything is syncing at the right time that I need it. Okay. So now I go into the gradebook and I can view the gradebook, and now you can see, look at all this data that I have for Smith. I can look at all of the stages. I can see that overall her average is an 85. I can see, stage 1, the average of her activities is 57. And then obviously onwards, you can see that the percentages are changing. But you could also focus it and say, okay, well, I want to see how Smith was doing in just sort of the earlier stages, or like the middle stages, we'll say, of the book. So 5, 7, and 8. I obviously did not close an activity from stage 6 yet. So I can see then from, right. So I can see that from these stages, we're showing a progression of skills, or we could say like, okay, well, Smith is really struggled out of the last handful of stages that we did before we close out of the red book. I can see that Smith needed some assistance in what was happening in stage 11. So maybe that gives an opportunity to have a one-on-one session with Smith, have her come after school. Like, let's work through some of these concepts to make sure that you are set with them before, again, we finally close the book and move on.
Students don't have access to this, but they do have access to their own individual scores, and so they can keep track of how they're doing from their own accounts. They don't have their own personal grade book. So if you want students to keep track of how they're doing, they can do the math on their own. But I think this is really important for trends, for them to see how they're doing, for you to see patterns in, what's happening over the course of the year, where they were maybe when they had committed to the fall play and had taken on too much, and then when they were able to pick back up. So again, like gradebook is specifically for teachers. I think there's some real benefit for for you to have specific control over. The students have access to their own information, but that own information is just for them.
Yes. And then as far as activities go, so there's a second like tab up here, right? I can also sort it to see how Smith is doing on activities as they go through. And then I can do, two different sorts at the same time. I can say, okay, I just want to focus on the activities. Oops, actually, I want stage 5. What about just her activity in stage 5, right? I can see reviewing the language, sorting, and then another reviewing the language activity. So I can see that these are her grades in this particular stage. And that helps to sort of focus your conversation then with the student.
I think this is really important if you're interested in doing something like standards-based grading, or even if you just want to focus specifically on the skills that your kids need, you can tell, okay, they're really nailing vocabulary, but they aren't getting the inflections. And so what do we need to focus on specifically with regard to inflections?
All right, I can also just gray out everything. I could sort my students by their average. I can click that in, and then look at all of the various activities in the stages here. I know it looks incomplete because I really need to, what I have to do is close out the other activities that have to do with the other stages. So anything that's open, I'll go ahead and close now. Should we look at another reporting feature?
I think one more reporting feature would be really helpful.
Okay. Vocabulary or language? What do you think?
Let's do a language activity.
Okay. Let's see here. Oh, let's sort declensions.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So, declensions are sort of an elusive concept for students. They're not always, they understand the family concept, but it's hard for them to imagine what a fancy word like declension is. So here is a sorting exercise that tests their knowledge of being able to put nouns into certain categories, for the purpose of predicting their endings, etc. So here are some first declension nouns, second, third, right? Now I can see things are starting to change a little bit, right? This student is still strong for first declension, but we start to drop off a little bit for second declension and then third. And maybe I can start to make some more diagnostic decisions about the student and their performance, or just the class and their capabilities, by saying, oh, okay, it looks like they're really struggling with words that end with an S. Maybe they're confusing it with argentarias, which is technically an S, but it's more of a US ending, right? So it does help me to kind of take a look at which specific words students are struggling with, and then make some sense of it from there.
One of the things when I was doing this exercise was thinking about what my students would most likely miss. And puer is definitely one of them. So I purposely missed it because I wanted to make the same mistake that my students would have. And the same with, I've had students who often have difficulty with, well, if it's feminine, it must be first declension. And I know that uxor means wife, so shouldn't it be first declension? And so just, wrapping your head around why would a student make that kind of mistake? And how we can get them to mark on the data that we have before us so that they have very clear, specific information about their learning so that they can improve it on their own. And I think just marking like puer, if you printed out a sheet, they would have an idea about what they need to do in order to work on in the future.
Yeah, so I mean, this gives you a lot of ideas too. It's a quick activity that you could do as a closure, for example. So maybe in the class period in which you introduce what is a declension, you assign this to students as an exit ticket or something like that. And then you're looking at the results just after class gets out, and you think, oh, okay, wait a second. I think that they might have had trouble with the second declension R ending, or, uxor with its, gender, and the gender association. So now you can go to your next class, or the next day's class as it is, and you can start to focus and say, okay, here we have this word, and it was very frequently mistakenly assigned. So, can someone help us to figure out like a mnemonic device to remember which declension it goes in, or some other teaching tool that you could use to inform your instruction and to practice it, and to give students an opportunity to master it. And then perhaps after that conversation, after some further practice, maybe you read a story, maybe you could give this activity to students again and see, have they been able to improve those skills? And because a sorting activity is really good for them to be able to have that conversation with themselves about making distinctions between words, but it doesn't take too long, right? It's a lot of drag and drop. So you can have your post-assessment. I mean, it doesn't have to be a formal assessment, but a post-assessment type of activity the next day, and you can make a really quick assessment then of the data to say, yes, okay, good. Second time around, they all got the Onulus Argentarius puer denotation down pat.
One of the things I was going to add, so I think these sorting activities are particularly helpful for gathering very quick data, both for you and for your students. And I say that because it's a quick and easy check to see if students understand the patterns that are going on. And it's a first step into helping students if you do push into more things like Latin composition, and you want to make sure that they're really getting the endings correctly. So not skipping that step is actually a crucial means of foundation for providing students understanding of material. It's a very easy scaffold, and I think that my students who have spent time on it have really benefited from that kind of practice. If I haven't taken the time to do something like that, I find that I am often on the losing end because I've rushed things too quickly and I don't get the data that I need. They don't get the feedback that they need for that early step in making sure that they really have everything together.
Very well said. Thank you. I have this long list of things that I've assigned to Smith, obviously for our webinar purposes, just to sort of demonstrate too. I know it's not specifically data related, but you can always edit the scheduling so that you can make it open for students to do for a longer period of time. Maybe you realize, okay, they're really not fully understanding some of the distinctions that I want them to understand. So you can extend the due date right from here. So you can take a look at the data of something that is live and say, oh, wait a second. The first half of the students who started answering this question are really struggling with questions, 2, 4, 6, 9, 11, etc. So you can say, okay, I'm going to go back and, the students who are still working on it, I'm going to give you an extra day. And if you want to, I can see that there's a gap, right, between what I've taught and between what your peers have started producing here. So I'm going to extend the scheduling so that students have extra time. And I'm going to put in a due date of, tomorrow instead. And you can do that right from the screen itself. All right, so scheduling details have been edited. All right, go back out. Oh, okay, 1 second. My Zoom window is over the X. Okay. All right. So I've closed out a lot more activities because I really wanted to show a much more robust assessment of the student experience. Again, just for time purposes, I'm just going to reload to make sure that everything has synced. And then we can go back to Smith's gradebook, and poor Smith will hang her head in even more shame than I've already put her through today.
No, it's totally fine. I was just thinking about when I was talking about contended, I misspoke. I was just thinking about words with macrons, but I don't even think contended has a macron in present or perfect. So sorry.
It's okay. No, I mean, it's not like it's recorded. Just kidding. So we have this really nice like overview of all of the stages 1 to 12 that shows a really nice progression of Smith's skills throughout the year. And then, of course, as I said, we can filter it rather by activities and by stages. So if I only really wanted to see her activities in stages 10, 11, and 12, now I can say, okay, well, we have, some pretty strong performance here at the end. Or you could take, an average of whatever it is. And then you can look at the activities that they did. But then this also gives you an idea of, well, I assigned you 3 different activities in stage 10. So although, yes, I'm looking at this lovely average of 100%, I need you to do all the other activities first so that I know that you have the proficiency percentage that I would like before, I let you move on to stage 11. So, imagine if it was more of a, not more, but if it's a self-paced type of environment, or if you are in one of those very unfortunate situations in which you have one Latin 2 student in a classroom full of Latin 3 students and you can't give them each the same amount of time and energy that you'd like to be able to do, this at least gives you an opportunity to give them some practice opportunities while you're working with the other group. And then, but then you can sort of set some data-based standards. Like, I'm going to give you all the activities in stage 10. I want to make sure that you have an average of 100 in all of them before you move on to stage 11, or, some similar conversation.
I really do think being able to select those things out is essential for your feedback to improve your teaching, for your students' feedback to improve their learning.
Yes. So, we've shown you that there's a lot more accountability that is in the new digital resources, right? We can make sure that students are actually doing the things that they say they're doing. We've shown you that the students now, their time and their engagement in such efforts is also being recorded. And so I have a better sense for any one activity and each student's sort of engagement in it. I also know when students are completing it, right? So I can, set the due date, etc. But now we're showing you that you can use a lot of this information to talk with the student and to help them make sense of their situation as well. Was there anything else you wanted to add?
I think that taking advantage of all of the specificity that Cambridge is offering with this 6th edition, because it's not available. Someone was asking earlier in the chat about the availability of the gradebook and all these new features with 5th edition Go. This is specifically for 6th edition. So having access to all of these things is super helpful in thinking about how to plan, how to reteach, how to move on if you think that students have everything that they already need. So specificity in data is exactly what we're looking for, and it's definitely something that I've never heard any administrator say, no more data, we don't need anything like that. So you've got a world of information at your fingertips, and all you just have to do is click.
Just speaking with one of my Spanish teacher colleagues today, and the system that they use and have used for a while has all of this accountability built right into it. And she was showing me a situation of a student who was asking for ex post facto credit for assignments. And so she was able to go back in time. She was able to see when the student completed it. She was able to see that they only spent, 35 seconds for any particular activity. And that, she was explaining to me like how the software does the grading for it based on the student's lateness as well as for their accuracy. So in a sense, this product is not just wonderful unto itself, but it does kind of bring you into that new era of data collection that a lot of your language colleagues are able to take advantage of. And so it's really nice to be able to have a tool like that on our side so that we can have the same types of conversations. Because as Smith said, data is sort of the name of the game in American education, at least. So it's nice to be able to have a product that gives you enough numbers and whatnot. But data is also important, I think, for teaching up to a certain extent, maybe not as much as the average administrator wants you to have data, but it does inform your teaching. It informs your approach to the student. It informs your approach to the class as a whole. It informs your pedagogy, right? Are you going to do more of a game or something to really engage kids' senses about singulars and plurals? Maybe you need a different approach because the first two activities that you've done in class have resulted in the fact that the class average is still, 75 or something like that. But singulars and plurals are kind of an essential concept. So now you go back to the drawing board and think of other things that you can or could do to try to get this particular skill to a point of proficiency that will be helpful for your students to have as they move forward too.
I'd really take advantage of what Jennifer posted in the chat as well. I think it's particularly helpful that if you're thinking about, do you want to move to 6th edition, the trial will give you an opportunity to play around and see if this is really what would work for you.
Thank you so much. Yeah, that's a great segue for me to go into. As Smith said in the chat, you'll find some resources about our trial and also our extended trial that includes the assignable language activities. I highly encourage doing that one because I think you get the most out of that trial to really learn how this software or how this is going to help you in the classroom. If you have any questions, please feel free to put them in the chat or in the question and answer. I haven't seen any come through, so we'll give it just another minute to see if anyone does have questions. Additionally, if you have a question you don't want to ask here, or you have questions that maybe you want to take offline, our email address is also in the chat, so that way you can ask those questions. This was our season finale of our spring webinar series, so stay tuned for when our next webinar is going to be. We'll be giving out more information about that in the next couple of weeks. Oh, and yep.
Sorry, I was just going to say, Smith and I have put our email addresses into the chat too. So if something occurs to you later on today, tonight, tomorrow, feel free to reach out to us. I'm sorry to interrupt you.
No, you're great. I was just about to say the same thing, so that's great. All right, well,
Okay.
Thank you so much for joining us, and we'll send this recording out soon. Have a great day, everyone. Bye-bye.
Thanks for joining us.